Well, we might as well get started. Hi, I'm Select Arcane, also known as Andrea. I'm from Region 11 in Canada. Specifically, I'm on the eastern central side, so around Toronto. I will be presenting this seminar, Model Horse Showing Seminar for the Beginner Shower. This is kind of geared towards people who have never shown before or who have been curious about showing, may have attended a show, want to learn more, how they can up their placings, things like that. So kind of introduction about myself. I've been collecting since 2014 officially, kind of on and off. I started with Schleich and Briar. My grandmother would get them for me at the Royal Winter Fair in Toronto. And then around 2014, I kind of got back into it because I wasn't really serious. I was just kind of collecting on the side and I wasn't part of the hobby. Couldn't go to Briarfest. I knew what it was, but couldn't go. And then in 2014, I just kind of looked up at my shelf one day and saw that I wonder if this thing is still around. So I looked up Briars and found that there was going to be a local show in my area that turned out to be Toronto Live, hosted by Lisa Sharp. I went and I haven't looked back. So here I am. I got out of Briars probably around 18 maybe. I started transitioning more into resins. I went to Briarfest in 2015, 2016, and then just kind of fell into it. Saw the resins gone. I've been the host of Toronto Live since 2018. Lisa Sharp moved to Ecuador and just kind of handed me the show. Literally just, here you go, gone. So yeah, I took over in 2018 and I've been running it ever since. We had a break in 2020 and 2021 because of the pandemic, but now we're back for 2023 and it's sold out. So at the end of this presentation, you'll be seeing that I'll answer any questions about that. By the way, if you have any questions, there's a Q&A little sheet at the top. Please answer your questions there. You can't speak during the seminar, nor can you go on camera or anything like that. So just ask your questions in the chat room. I've been showing in both Canada and the US since 2018. I started in Canada, of course, with Toronto Live, and just kind of moved into North Carolina when I judged at Circle C Classic Model Horse Show. And I've judged for other shows around Canada, like Autumn Live and things like that. I already mentioned I've been to Briarfest 2015, 2016. And I'm also a part-time artist completely for fun and content creator, Select Arcane. If you see my channel, I make mostly tutorials and entertainment videos about the model horse hobby. So that means unboxings, tutorials on how to repair things, how to paint things. My word is definitely not law. There are artists way better than I am. But all in all, I just kind of mostly post things for fun. Outside of the hobby, I breed and raise thoroughbreds. That is not a thoroughbred, that is Iero. And he is Percheron Morgan. He's my riding horse. Otherwise, everyone else is a thoroughbred. We've had some success with some Grey Stakes winners in Woodbine in Canada and have some successful horses in the US. And before I was breeding race horses and racing them, I was a pony clubber who got to C2. I used to play polo all around the world in Thailand, Argentina, and Canada. I used to be on the Trillium Circuit show jumping, and I sort of still am a field hunter with Iero. So enough about me. We're going straight into the hobby. So this is what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about the basics, how to judge a show, and that will include breed, workmanship, collectability, and performance. I've kind of broken it up into the different classes. These are the typical classes that you show in. And I will also be talking about the tips and tricks on how to pack for your show, how to document your models, what you're going to do when you arrive at the show. And this goes for any show, really, not just Toronto Live. And then at the very end, we're going to talk about Toronto Live. I'll show a few things like the raffle prizes, the performance challenge, the team medals, and answer any questions that you might have left over. I'll try to answer any questions throughout when I see them pop up, if they're relevant for what I'm talking about. Otherwise, I'll leave them to the end. So let's get started. So the basics. Model horses are divided into multiple categories. This includes original finish, artist resin, China / breakables, and customs. So I'll break those out specifically, but there are multiple sizes within those divisions. And those sizes are anything from 1/6, like Barbie or Monster High scale, traditional. This is a traditional, by the way. This is a traditional foal, classic, stablemate, and micro. And there's a few sizes in between, like bantam and things like that, and railroad scale, but those are kind of the most common that I have listed. And anything that wins or kind of goes through the motions of a show that are sanctioned with NAMSA, they receive a card at the end. So I'll talk about that in a second and later on in the presentation. So let's first talk about the divisions. So the biggest one that you'll probably notice when you go to a show is original finish, also known as OF. If you've been in the hobby forums or in the community for a while, you might know these terms. So these include Breyer, Peter Stone, anything that's mass produced. It has to be produced in a factory. They can be any size so long, again, as it's produced in a factory, and they cannot be repainted, repositioned, or customized in any way. They have to be straight out of the box. Minor repairs are okay, like a chipped ear, so long as it's not noticeable. You cannot have anything drastically changed. And they always have their own classes. They might be broken up by different brands in these classes, like Peter Stone and Breyer usually show separately, but if you have a smaller show with less people, they might show together. These are made of plastic. The companies do sometimes create resin versions, especially Breyer. They do create like porcelain versions or resin versions, but all in all, most of them are plastic, and those factory produced models that are not plastic still usually show in their own mass produced division. They can be glossy or matte finish. So on screen, you have a matte horse. Glossy would be glossy. They can show together, that's fine. So on the other side, this is what I collect, are artist resins. So these are models that are sculpted by artists and produced by artists. So just to kind of go back, those same artists usually sculpt for Breyer, and Breyer produces those horses. They're factory injection molded, and they lose a lot of detail, and it's just the way that the medium works and the way the molds work, and because they're mass produced. Resins, on the other hand, keep the detail just because of the process. They're made of polyurethane resin, which is a plastic essentially, but it holds a lot more detail. It's usually heavier and a little bit more fragile. So that's why it's more preferred by artisans. Meanwhile, mass-produced horses are more durable and more toy. Sometimes they're 3D printed. Within the last few years, a lot of 3D printed models have come forth made of resin. Sometimes they're made of other filaments from resin printers. Those sometimes have printing lines and sometimes have a few issues, but things are coming along. You might see like some gray ones, but all resins are virtually sold unpainted, so that you can specifically choose the paint job for yourself. So if you want to paint your own horse and have a portrait of your own horse, you can certainly do that. Usually they're also shown together with medallions. So this is a medallion, and these are kind of like bas relief, like flat pieces. They're also made of polyurethane resin. They're also produced by artisans. It's just the way that they're presented is they're flat. They're a lot more cost effective. Speaking of which, resins are considerably more expensive than OF horses. Because they're produced in lower quantities, have more detail, take a lot of time and commitment, and they're very expensive to make. They can get really, really expensive. Like, I highly recommend that you do not start buying resins if you don't have the pockets for it. It gets pretty deep. So next on the list that are Also exceptionally expensive are the chinas or breakables. The term is kind of interchangeable because not all of these horses are made of china, like bone china. Some people call them breakables to kind of encapsulate the porcelain and things like that because they're fragile and breakable. They can be made in a factory, like I already said. Breyer has made them and things like that. Or they can be mass produced. They can be, produced by artisans. They have to be made of clay and then fired in a kiln. And instead of painting them with paints, so you paint them with glazes and things like that. It's a whole science because, for example, did you know that painting a chestnut china is almost impossible because of how the glazes in the kilns work, so that the reds kind of get fired out of the horses? It's crazy. Like, it's a whole science, and when you glaze the horse, it's not the color you're going to end up with. These horses are virtually always glossy, but there are some, exceptions to the rule. Like, porcelain doesn't have to be glossy. And there are shows that specifically focus on breakables and things like that, like breakables at Breyer. But for the most part, they're not as popular just because they're so fragile, so expensive, and they're really nice, but just really hard to get. So customs are another part and another class. They're any altered OF horse. They can be repainted, repositioned, haired, anything that's changed to the horse that's quite drastic. It doesn't even have to be drastic at all. However, customized resins don't show in the custom division. They actually do show in the resin division still, and you do not have to mention that they're altered in any way. Usually the custom division is split between novice artists and professionals, and sometimes there's a class in between that depending on the show you go to. Novice artists are artists that might not have done this before, don't sell their custom work, not really sure what they're doing. This is their first time. And then the open division gets NAN cards, which I'll explain a little bit later. And those are usually artists that sell professionally or have kind of a handle on what they're doing. Most shows do not let champions or reserve champions show in that show again. So that means that if you win, for example, at Toronto Live, and you get a championship in the custom division, you cannot show, and that is the novice division, you cannot show novice next time at Toronto Live. That's the rule, because you're seen as a little bit too good for that division. So that's why sometimes there's a gap class in between, so that you can go from novice to kind of like a standard class that still doesn't get NAN cards, but you can get more experience with people that are more at your level. But that is all show dependent. So now that you know the the classes and kind of where to put your horses, let's talk about how to judge them. So these are specifically going to be rules that judges follow. So if you're also interested in judging, this is kind of what you're going to be looking at. So we're going to be looking at a breed, and that's the ABCs. ABCs are the absolute fundamental part of judging a model horse. So A is for anatomy, B is for biomechanics, and C is for conformation. So anatomy refers to the internal and external structures of the body and their physical relationships. Is this a horse? Is this a cow? Anatomically, what is this? So I have some pictures on the side here that are like anatomical drawings. These are the foundation of what a horse is. So we don't have that problem in the real horse world where like a horse walks by and you go, is that a horse? Well, yeah, it's a horse. Biomechanics is the study of the structures and function of motion, the mechanical aspects of biological systems at any level from whole organisms to organs, aka can the horse move? Can it function? As the horse walks by and you know that it's a horse, is it walking like a horse? Is it on two legs? That's something that model horses definitely don't have. Model horses don't need to walk around, they don't need to graze, they don't need to lie down and get back up. So that's where biomechanics kind of comes into model horses, because when you have a sculpture of a horse and you have some wonky anatomy, yes, you can still make out that it's a horse. It might not be a pretty horse, but you can still make out that it is a horse. But as a judge, you need to know in your mind and be trained enough to know, can this horse move? And compared to the other horses on the table, is this horse better suited to win than the others? Which brings us over to conformation. So conformation evaluates the degree of correctness of a horse's bone structure and musculature and its body proportions in relation to each other. This essentially means that this breaks out what breed the horse is. So now that you've established that you have a horse and the horse can move correctly, what kind of horse is this? Is this a Clydesdale? Is this a warm blood? Is this a pony? Things like that. The conformation kind of not just dictates what breed the horse is, but how good that horse is for the breed. So undesirable conformation can limit the ability to perform a certain task. A horse's conformation is usually judged by what is intended for its use, thus to perform a function, and it's one of the first set of traits considered for judging conformation. So when you look at good versus bad conformation, these are two thoroughbreds. They are pure registered thoroughbreds. And if these were model horses, it's quite clear who would be the winner here. So when you're looking at conformation on the table at a model horse show, you're specifically looking at, what is this a horse? Number one, is this could this horse move in real life? Is this, in this case, a thoroughbred? And is this a good example of a thoroughbred? That's kind of what we judge in breed is this a good example of what this breed represents? So here we have two thoroughbreds, and this is not a discussion about feeding a horse or exercising a horse or the health of a horse. This is just looking at their body. So a thoroughbred should be nice and square, a little bit long, have equal proportions between the hip, the flank, and the butt. So it should be an equilateral triangle throughout so that it's a good example of a thoroughbred. The butt to hock to fetlock at the bottom should be relatively parallel to each other and in a line. If you look on the right, this horse, the horse on the right does not have those characteristics. First off, its hip is dropped down, so it's not level with its withers. That's the blue line. The pink triangle on the bum, that's not an equilateral triangle. All sides are not equal. And the point of bum to the fetlock is way off. That's the yellow line. The leg is pushed very far under the horse's body. And this is a conformation photo. So this is the quote-unquote same pose between the two horses. And it's clear that the horse on the left is a much better example of a thoroughbred. Now, just because you put two thoroughbreds on the table or two quarter horses on the table doesn't mean that it's a good example of the breed, because there's also different types. So if you're not familiar with horses and different disciplines, it would be a very positive thing for you to brush up on your disciplines, essentially, and equitation. So on the left, we have a reining quarter horse, and on the right, we have a pleasure quarter horse. They are both registered quarter horses. The problem is that they're used for two separate different things. The one on the left gets down and low, gets into tight turns to do reining. It's essentially the Western version of dressage. And the horse on the right is very long, tall, like a thoroughbred, but has the musculature and characteristics of a quarter horse mostly in the face and in the thicker bones. So these two horses are not wrong. They're perfectly good examples to have on the table, but it would be a very good idea to document what the horse represents. Again, here we have two examples of Arabian horses, and again, neither of them are wrong. On the left, you have an endurance Arabian. These horses are usually meant for long distance riding, outdoors, 10 miles up to 50 miles, sometimes longer. They need to be sturdy, hardy, sound, and carry a rider for a very long distance. The horse on the right doesn't get ridden at all. They are virtually used for being beautiful, presenting as the highlight of the breed in halter. Again, not wrong, but a totally different example of what the breeds represent. So again, when you're showing a model that looks like on the right or on the left, the model on the right actually might win over the one on the left just because it's what you would expect an Arabian to look like. When a judge walks by, yes, that's an Arabian. It's a better example of the breed, but it's not wrong to put the one on the left, but you should document what kind of Arabian it is for better results. So when talking about conformation, it's very important to talk about conformational issues. Some horses are bred with extreme things, and these are seen as desirable to some breeders. Again, we're not talking about the morality of it, but some of this sometimes is translated into the model horse world. And sometimes some judges might see an issue with this and not look at your entry based on the fact that some morality issues in real life could translate over to the model horse world. You don't want to depict the bad parts of the horse world in the model world. That also goes for performance later on, which I'll talk about. So I would advise kind of steering away from these extremes if you can, because you just might not be seen in a good light at the show. So all of this, how is this relevant to model horses? Now you know everything about the real horses and that sort of thing. When you're looking at a model horse, you can draw those same triangles and same lines. The horse on the right is a Peter Stone, and he has a great front end, nice triangle, nice straight yellow line, and then the blue line that represents the line from the withers to the bum suddenly sinks, and the point of butt does not line up with the hock, nor does it line up with the fetlock, because the leg is pushed too far back. So it's just kind of an odd thing. So if think of it as a real horse. If this was a real horse, would this horse be able to move around comfortably and do its job? If you're putting it in a dressage pose, can it do its job? Does this breed represent well? So the ABCs are the foundation of judging for both models and real horses, just minus the anatomy part, really, because you already know it's a horse. And the ABCs are used worldwide. It doesn't matter if you're showing in North America or if you're showing in the UK. The UK is very, very, very sticky about the ABCs and are really, really into it. So they kind of focus more so on that part. If the horse on the right was a custom, this specific horse might not place above other models if the sculpture was better capturing better biomechanics and better ABCs, essentially. It just kind of depends on how good the judge is. And when you go to a show, keep in mind who's judging, because their previous credentials kind of put the show on the map of what kind of level it is. If you're going to a local show with kind of new judges, you know that it's kind of more of a laid back kind of thing. But if you go to somewhere like BreyerFest or the Nationals, those are the top tier judges in the hobby. So the NAN cards that I was talking about, I do have examples of these cards. So NAN cards are for the Nationals. When you win at a show, you get a NAN card. So the NAN cards look like this. So for breed, you get a green card, and these cards are kind of your ticket to go to the Nationals. What are the Nationals? The Nationals are a show that is hosted by NAMSA, and NAMSA is the sanctioned event that, or sanctioned body that kind of, or how do I put this, like, gives shows the right to have the name NAMSA stamped on and then be qualifying to go to the national shows. So first and second place gets NAN cards, and those first and second horses can go to the nationals and compete for an all-around championship, essentially. So breed cards are green, and then we'll get into the rest of the cards later on. Though the ABCs are very, very, very important, and you have to have a keen eye for these things. We are limited with factory models. Some of them have a lot of common flaws, and it's important for a judge to be very understanding of these things. Some models just had an issue in the factory. Some models just have a few issues here or there, and you have to be very forgiving when you're judging. And don't just throw out your horses that you look at and go, oh, you have bad ABCs. No, it's not like that. When you're talking about OF models, there's a lot of forgiveness that takes place. Like, for example, the horse on the right is still a beautiful model and still does very well at shows as the mold has. So, final questions to ask yourself about breed. Does this model have the correct horse anatomy? Like, is this a horse? Is this a mule? Is this a donkey? By the way, mules have completely different anatomy than horses. Their pelvis slopes down, their back is a lot flatter. So keep this in mind. If this horse was alive, could it move correctly? Would it be limping? Would it be dragging its legs around? Would it be able to move? And then, can this horse have the proper conformation for the class? AKA, if you're showing it in a performance, can this horse go over a large jump that you're setting it up to, or is it going to crash into it? Is this horse too big and too lanky to be reining? Or is this horse just not the conformation to be the breed that you want it to be? Like, maybe it's too heavy to be a Clydesdale. So think about this stuff and do your research. And finally, does the color match? Looking here, I have this foal, and it's a cute little Breyer foal, black Appaloosa, but unfortunately, black foals don't look like this at all. They usually have gray legs, they don't have pure black hooves, and this is something that I would dock on this model if it was the only thing on the table, because it's just not an accurate depiction of a black foal. So, moving on to workmanship. Workmanship gets complicated. It's only for customs, resins, and chinas, because as an OF collector, you wouldn't need to look into it very much, because they're factory produced. They're not what a lot of hobbyists would see as works of art. So Peterstone models, even though they're mass produced, can also be judged for workmanship because they are produced in such limited amounts. There are a lot of one-of-a-kinds, a lot of five-of-a-kinds, certainly runs less than 100. So it's they're still hand painted by artists in the US, and they can be judged for workmanship based on that fact. So workmanship entries are in yellow NAN cards, which I have right here. So again, these horses can qualify to go to nationals with their yellow card. But you do judge workmanship entries a lot differently than breed entries. For example, you are still considering the ABCs, but it's more so to do with the artistry of the model. So is the horse prepped well? That means that, are there any seams, any plastic pieces sticking out? Is there paint chipping off? Is there dust on the horse? Things like that. You want to consider the finish work, aka the paint job. Finish work just means the final coat of paint over top. And you want to see the shading, the depth, the light, things like that. And then you need to document for unusual colors and patterns. But quickly going back to the prep work part, if your horse is not prepped and still has pieces sticking out and hairs under the finish and stuff, your horse really won't be considered unless you have documentation or something like that. Okay. So the cards that I'm talking about, the documentation cards, are, one second, these. So I'll be talking about these in a second, but these are the documentations. They're for unusual colors, patterns, or breeds. So here we have a chestnut Arabian, but if this Arabian was spotted and you're putting it as an Arabian, the judges will need to see an example of what kind of spotted Arabian is there. It can't possibly be a purebred Arabian. So it's your job as the shower to convince the judge otherwise. And it's always nice to teach a judge something as well, in a polite way, of course. If your horse has unusual features, like I'm showing here, this horse here has scars on its legs. It's important to document that because otherwise it could be seen as a fault. It's not a usual thing to put on a model. Most artists like to have the model to be perfect and not, muddy or sweaty or blemished. So it's important to add documentation for those things. Without the documentation, this horse never, ever, ever places, by the way. So, collectability. If you have any questions, by the way, and if I'm moving too quickly, just you can raise your hand or you can ask the questions in the question box at the top. And I will, of course, get to answering questions. So moving on to collectability. Collectability is the determination to decide how valuable a model is. This is only for the factory produced horses. It's really only for Breyers, because with Peter Stone, it's like I already mentioned, they're so limited that they're all collectible. So they're not really put into the collectability division. So the acronyms are RR is regular run, meaning that there's been unlimited made or a huge amount made that has not really been recorded. A special run, SR, usually from events like Breyerfest or Breyer West. Those are special collectible models that have been made into a limited run, like maybe 150 or so, up to, I think, 500. Those are special runs, but you can only get them at those times for those events. And then Oak is known as one of a kind. It's one of a kind. So classes are usually split between regular runs, special runs, and one of a kinds. So you'll have, like, for example, regular run classes for the unlimited models, special runs from X amount of horses made to X amount of horses made, and one of a kinds that are really, really special. There's also collectability classes for date ranges. So for example, if you have horses made in the earlier Breyer days, 40s, 50s, 60s, sometimes there's classes for that. And then there's classes for horses made in more modern times. So collectability can be split in multiple different ways. Now, documentation for your model is mandatory in collectability. Here we are, collectability card right here. I have them as yellow. Otherwise, that if you put your horse on the table and don't tell the judge how collectible the horse is, and if it doesn't have its paperwork, like a card here, or maybe the card insert from your Breyer box, or things like that, the judge might just bypass your horse, because most shows have these as mandatory things to have in your show. So my card here, I got the information off of Identify Your Breyer, and that's a really, really good resource to use. I have the name of the model, and you can see it on the screen as well. The model number, that's definitely not required. The date ranges of which the model was made. The card I'm holding up is 2004 to 2006. It's classified as a regular run. The one on the screen, which is Cheveo, was a 2008 Collector's Choice. So that is a special run. I have the sculpture here for both. So the one I'm holding is sculpted by Summer Prosser, and the horse on screen is sculpted by Kathleen Moody. And I also have the retail value, but that's not really required because retail values change over time. It's just things that I've added, and a picture is very helpful to have. Again, you can get this off Identify Your Breyer. It's a free to use website. It has so much information. It's absolutely fabulous. So, performance. Performance is something that's really, really fun and also really intimidating, I think, for some people. Performance is a 3D snapshot in time of a horse performing an activity. And it doesn't matter what that activity is, so long as it's essentially a 3D photo. Performance entries require a lot of research. This makes it a lot easier for somebody who maybe shows in that discipline or rides that discipline to be able to create an entry that's more legitimate. So for example, if you are a show jumper and you have a show jumping entry, you'll probably know already what legal bits are, what the better saddles are, the fitness of the horse, the conformation of the horse that's required, things like that, the position of the rider. Or you'll just have to do a lot of brute force research and watch a lot of YouTube videos, maybe go to shows in your area. If you're showing higher end shows in the model horse realm, and by that I mean your horse is jumping a very high height on the show table, keep in mind that those horses that show in that level are not the same horses that you would get at a riding camp. So make sure that the horse conformation that we've learned before fits the horse, that fits the discipline that your horse is performing, because it just won't place. Everything needs to be in scale. And I mean, I don't think I really have to say that, but I think I do at the same time. If your saddle's too big for your horse, don't use it. It's going to break your entry. If your props are too big, you can get away with some certain things like food items. I mean, you can get giant sandwiches all the time, but you can't usually get a giant saddle every time for your tiny horse, things like that. So if you do come first or second in a performance class, you'll get a pink NAN card. And I don't show performance all that often, but here's a pink card. Performance is a lot of fun. But again, it's very, very, very intimidating to get started. First off, it's very expensive. You can, as a novice performance shower, again, novices and open showers show differently in different classes. But novice performance showers are fully able to use Breyer tack, or first-time tack makers show off their tack in these divisions. It's a very, very, very safe and nice place to start, because you don't have to worry about everything. But for the open divisions where you win NAN cards, it gets very expensive. So, by the way, novice showers, and this goes for custom division as well, and performance showers, do not get NAN cards. Only open showers get NAN cards. So, performance challenges in the performance realm are not the same as performance classes. And I know that is a bit complicated to talk about, but performance classes are looking towards the suitability to the horse in a class, showing off a certain discipline. So if you have the over fences division and you're showing hunter, they want the perfect hunter entry with the perfect horse, the perfect rider, the perfect position, the perfect tack. If you're showing barrel racing, same thing. But in a performance challenge entry, they will give you something like a prompt. Like for example, at Toronto Live at the sushi bar, by all means, you don't have to have the perfect entry. The horse on the right is actually showing in a performance class, performance challenge class, and I set this exact entry up at the Jennifer show, and it's a perfect example of just completely having fun. By the way, I use this setup because the bridle doesn't even fit the horse properly, and the saddle doesn't fit the horse properly, so the saddle's sliding off and the bridle's falling off. So it actually works really well, and it's gotten me a lot of ribbons just because it's a, not to brag, but a well-made entry, even though it does not fit within a performance class. But it does fit within a scene class. So scene classes are again, snapshots in time, but it's a scene. So bringing your horse in from the paddock, kid falling off the pony, it's a good opportunity for creative entries. While the performance challenge classes are more so silly prompts. So just follow the prompt, like at the sushi bar, like how far can you go with that? kind of thing. So now that we've kind of talked about the classes and things like that, and I don't see any questions posted, unless I'm mistaken, let's talk about packing and prepping for your show. So it's not a light affair when you go to a model horse show, because it depends on how many horses you're going to be bringing. So if you're going to be bringing a lot of traditional scale horses, you're going to need a large totes to pack your models in. Smaller models can easily fit in tackle boxes. You can get those from, your local outdoor store, or Michael's has a lot of these fabulous tackle boxes. Pony pouches. This is a pony pouch. Your model fits inside. You can nicely secure them in, and some of them have little name tags. You can also use soft t-shirts as well if you don't have pony pouches. Fluffy makeup brushes are very handy to bring to your show. Personally, just a hint, nudge, when I'm judging a division, it doesn't matter if it's a workmanship division or not. If there's dust on your model, I'm going to dock your points, because use a brush, just dust it off, keep it clean, because you're supposed to be showing the horse as the perfect example, and having dust and hair on your horse does not show that. Tags are really, really, really important and absolutely mandatory. So a tag should be presented on the back leg away from the judge, like so. And your tag needs to have certain information on it. And the information is show dependent on where you're showing. So if you're showing your Breyerfest, you'll be assigned a number for the show, and you'll put the number on the tag on one side and then the horse's name on the other side. If you're showing in places like Region 10, again, you'll be assigned a number. But for most other places, on one side of the tag, you'll put the horse's name and your initials, and on the back side, you'll put the breed, the gender on the other side, okay? So that's how it's gonna be for Toronto Live. Horse's name and your initials on one side, and on the other side, breed and gender. Now, point of the tags is to keep yourself kind of anonymous. White tags are preferable. You can get these are called price tags, I think, at your local Staples. If you don't have it, I don't even know if the States has Staples, but any stationery store has these types of tags for products. They should be white, they should be blank, and they should have enough room on them to write your stuff. Using neon or pretty tags will kind of give yourself away, and you just really want to keep yourself anonymous. So I've been holding up this binder a few times. So a binder for organizing your winnings and stuff is kind of important. Mine's really messy right now, but essentially you put your horse's ribbons, put your NAN cards in. You could keep your documentation in these binder flaps, and it just keeps you a lot more organized at the show. I really highly recommend it, and I kind of keep it in the mandatory section. Another mandatory thing to have for your show is a tablecloth. You definitely want to bring this with you and put it on top of your boxes, which is the first thing you take out when you get to the show. The tablecloth keeps your table, first off, identifiable for you, so when you're walking around with your horses, you can find your stuff, but also if your horse falls over, it prevents any scratches. I highly recommend printing off a copy of your class list so that you can check things off. And I always recommend for new showers that you should write your horse's name in the class that you're going to be showing, and you can check them off as you show them. So if you're going to have 5 horses in a certain class, you want to write all their names down. There's usually printed copies of class lists for the judges available, but I highly recommend that you bring your own because there's never enough to go around. A water bottle is definitely something that you're going to need. It's usually a very long day. Shows usually run from really early morning, like 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, to as late as 10 p.m. really, and it goes all the time with only one break for lunch. Toronto Live is not as long, but it's pretty intense and long. We're going to be starting at 9 a.m. doors open, horses on the table at 9:30, and I try to wrap up like 5:36 and go for dinner afterwards, and usually we all go for dinner. So it's really recommended that you have a water bottle. By the way, at the Toronto Live venue, there's going to be a water bottle filling station right outside the door, so you don't have to worry about that. All dealings at model horse shows are done in cash. Most show halls are not equipped for internet, so therefore things like credit card or Square readers or things like that never work. And I cannot guarantee cell reception to use PayPal, so most things are done in cash. Raffle tickets are always cash, and the vendors who sell at shows usually only take cash as well, unless they are equipped for PayPal at that moment. So these are some optional extras that you should bring to the show and think about. Sticky wax, I don't have any with me right now, but it's essentially a wax that lets you stick your bits to your horses. Pen and paper is very nice to have so that if you lose a tag or things like that, or if you lose a documentation card, you can quickly write on it. Your documentation cards are really important. I should have put those in the mandatory section. Horse stands are things that keep your horse upright. You do not have to show your horses upright. I should have mentioned that in the ABC part, but it is not mandatory to show your horse upright. You can show them on a cloth on the table, but you might be docked points because your horse, you won't be able to see all around the horse. I do recommend a sweater and an apron. Usually show halls are very cold. They don't usually provide a lot of heating. And an apron's very nice to have so you can put your cards in, or extra tags, your pen, and your brushes. So, how do you pack for your show, right? Pack in the order of your class list, from back to front, essentially. So, the horses that are going to be showing last should be packed first, and the horses that are going to be showing first should be packed last so that they're on top. So, if you're late running to your show, you don't have to worry. You can just take your tablecloth from the top, put it on the table, and put your first few horses on the table and run to the ring. And you can get started that way. And it's a lot easier than scrambling, going, oh, I don't know where I packed my horse. Oh, no. Sort your documentation cards before you leave home. That's why I suggest the binder method. So you can just flip over, grab your card, and put it on the table. Make a checklist. Not just on the class list, but also a checklist of things you need to bring or things so you don't forget. If the weather is really mild, and if you have a car that's going to the show with you, I recommend packing the night before, putting all the horses in the night before, so that all you have to do is get your breakfast, put your jacket on, and get into the car. Done. So much easier. And instead of hauling everything at 5 a.m. or 3 a.m. and there are some shows that start really early and some people leave really, really, really early. I recommend writing all your tags ahead of time and attaching them to your models before you get to the show, because if you have 100 horses you're going to be showing that day, that means you're going to be putting 100 tags on that day. It becomes very, very, very tiring, and your wrist is going to be very sore before you even walk into the ring. And I recommend packing fragile resins or chinas or things in a gun case. My gun case is packed away, so I can't show you, but essentially camera equipment cases also work. You can open them up. They're filled with soft foam, and you can cut pieces of foam out and lay your horse in flat, close the case, and they're completely secure. And if you're going to be flying for a show, I highly recommend gun cases for those really fragile models, because they are a lifesaver. They kept my horses really safe on my last flight. So, documentation. We've been talking about all this documentation, and I haven't really gone through the rest of it. So I've already talked about what should be on a collectability card. Again, they're mandatory for collectability classes, and they contain your model information, including run size and year value and everything. Now, breed cards. Breed cards are not mandatory. But they are highly recommended for certain things. So if you're going to be showing a bay quarter horse, I can assure you, you do not need a breed card for a bay quarter horse, because everyone knows a quarter horse can come in bay. But what a lot of people wouldn't know is, can a quarter horse come in Overo? Judges might start scratching their heads and go, that might be a paint. So if you have an unusual color for a horse or a really unusual breed, like for example a Cathawari or a Conic, or things that are, you've gone, I don't even know what that is, a breed card would be very, 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 very useful. So what I've done is I've copied my information, just a quick paragraph off Wikipedia, basically what they're used for, what they kind of look like, what colors they come in, and what size they come in, and I put some pictures. If you're going to be showing a horse of a certain color on your breed card, then I recommend choosing a photo of that breed for your breed card that looks like your model. So the one I'm holding, I was showing a buckskin Morgan, so I made sure to add a buckskin Morgan to my breed card, but also add a regular colored horse for my breed card. And the one on screen is a blue roan Pinto, so I made sure to add a horse in the same pose, but also a horse in the same color. Now, performance cards are the same as breed cards, and there's going to be a photo later on, and I don't have one on me right now, but they're similar to breed cards. They're not mandatory, but it does tell the judge what your horse is doing, and it's useful for lesser known tack, disciplines, and other scenes. So for example, racing tack, if you are showing Arabian racing, for example, it's not as familiar to people as, for example, thoroughbred racing. So it's a good idea to have something like a breed card, or sorry, a performance card. If you're doing something really unusual, like for example, Banai from Japan, then again, a performance card is really, really, really handy. You might not even place without a card if you are showing something really unusual. And that's just because the judge might just not know. They might see an entry that they do know and do understand and know, yes, I know this is correct, and might completely overlook your entry. So that's why a performance card is so important. Now, the sizing of performance cards are important. Anything larger than what is shown might not be accepted. Some show hosts are pretty specific on this because there's just not enough room on the table for a full A4 size sheet of paper. And if you have a class that has a lot of horses, it's just not fair to the other showers to have such a huge piece of paper on the table. So I highly recommend keeping it down to a smaller size. Here's just a close-up of the breed cards. Again, I got this off Wikipedia, and here I was showing a red dun Pintavian. So on the right, I have a red dun. Collectability card, again, they're mandatory. Here's just a close-up of what a collectability card looks like. And finally, my performance card example. The card on the left is one that is kind of more in line with how I present my cards now. You can have photos like on the right, or you can just have kind of like a drawing of what the horse is going to be doing. You can have it as like the pattern that they're doing, or just a picture of the horse. There's no real specific method to it, so long as you keep the paper useful and informative. By the way, it's also very handy to keep double-sided cards. So if you have two different breeds or things like that, or if you need to flip over to collectability for that same horse, you can do so, and it saves a lot of paper at the end. So now you know everything about a model horse show and why we're showing at the model horse show. But when you arrive to the show, what do? Now, this is pretty universal for every show, but some are a little bit different. First off, you need to check in with the show host at the front or at the front table, depending on the show. So if you're walking into the show and you don't know where to go, try to find the show host. And if there's no table up front, try to find the show host. But if there is a table up front, somebody's sitting there waiting for you, check in with them. For most shows, there's a sign-in sheet. You'll put your name, there'll be your name, and you put your initials beside, and those are the same initials that are going to be used on your tags. So then we know who's who, and when we hand in the results at the end of the show, then you'll know whose horse is yours. But again, this is not the same for every show. So step 2, find your table. Toronto Live has free choice seating, except for a few exceptions. Some people have requested certain tables to be close up to the show ring if they have disabilities or things like that. So there might be your name on table, or there might be free choice seating. So check in before the show, and that information is usually on the show's page if they're going to have free choice seating or not. So step 3, lay out your tablecloth and start setting up your models first to last. Like I mentioned, that if you're going to be showing those horses at the end of the show, they should be packed first so that you get them out of the box last. While all this is happening, your show host is going to be setting things up still, shuffling around paperwork, signing people in, running around, getting raffle prizes from people and setting them up on the table, things like that. Once you're set up, go get some raffle tickets and start socializing. Go find your friends, go hang out. The show will be starting soon, if it hasn't already. And wait until the show opens and the rings open for classes, because the host is going to do a whole intro on, welcoming everyone, kind of what you're going to be expecting, and kind of a timeline for the show. And the show host will also be pointing out what rings are going to be designated for the classes. You don't want to start putting random horses on random tables and hope for the best. So remember to listen for your classes, speak up if you need more time, and keep away from the rings while judges are working. There is no harm in not being able to hear a class being called, or just wanting to check in, or if you need more time. That's totally fine. We're okay with that. We're happy to accommodate. And while judges are working, it can be seen as cheating if you start walking up to the ring and grabbing your horse or asking the judges while they're judging. So please just keep away from judges while they're working. The judges will be announcing when classes are open, when classes are going to close, and then when classes are closed. And then they'll announce when to pick up your horses as well. So that is everything, essentially, the beginnings of showing at a model horse show. Again, I don't see any. Oh, hold on. I do have a question. Does the collectability card need to have a photo of the model on it? No, they don't have to. It's not mandatory. However, it is very helpful for the judge to know if that is the actual horse. So, I'm changing my opinion on that. Yes, I would definitely put a picture on a collectability card to show exactly what this horse is, especially if it came in a special box or something. If you can find a photo of that special box, that can also be very helpful. So, I don't see any more questions there. So I'm going to move on to the Toronto Live part of it. And, okay, so Toronto Live raffle. The raffle is usually provided by people who attend the show. A lot of people donate things like briars or baskets or snacks or things like that. And that's usually given the day of the show. Some stuff is shipped to me, the show host, ahead of time. And always there's going to be special prizes. So in previous years, there's been resins donated as the special prize, like the highlight prize. This year, the sponsor, as usual for Toronto Live, is A&A Farms. In the past, A&A Farms has donated resins. This year, they've donated a very special performance prop, which I am not going to show here because it's still going to remain special. And it's international themed because this is an Olympics themed show. Another prize that you'll get at Toronto Live that will actually not be part of the raffle is this. This is a flag horse that I painted before the pandemic, by the way. So He's been sitting around for a while. This is a classic Briar customized with the flags. And anyone who has entered the show will have a chance for this horse. So all you have to do is go up to the front table. Eric will be sitting there. He's going to be the show secretary for the show. And you have to guess how many flags are on the horse. Person with the closest guess wins the horse. Raffle is usually pulled at lunchtime so that everyone can grab their prizes and show them before the end of the day. So, oh, yes, I did talk about everything for the raffle. Okay. So, performance challenge, I've kind of already touched on this in the performance class. It's a fun class. Do not take it too seriously. It is supposed to be as creative as possible, as fun as possible, and everyone's a winner. So it's not, you're not going to get an AND card, you're not going to get ribbons or anything like that, but you will be getting like special prizes. Like, for example, you can expect snacks. You can expect silly things like miniatures, like random things, but everyone's going to be getting these things. And you're going to be following these prompts that have already been listed in the class list. These prompts are show appropriate, and it's just your job to run with it. Just be wild, be crazy. Come up with the funnest entry that you want and the silliest that you want. It does not have to be correct tack. It doesn't have to be the correct breed or horse. You can even have like stuffed animals, like anything you want. And finally, the team medals. So for this show, everyone has been competing in a country, essentially, and there has been 3 people per country. And why, when you register for Toronto Live, did I set it up that way? Because you're all competing for team medals. So if you win in your classes and you're getting first, seconds, and thirds, those go towards team points. Championships do not go towards points. Championships get the rosettes at the end of the day. And speaking of rosettes, these are the rosettes for the show. There's a gold medal and a silver medal. And so these are going to be the rosettes. So rosettes do not count towards your team medals. The country with the highest points, so members who got first, seconds, or thirds in classes throughout the show, everything will be tallied up at the end of the day, and you will be presented with a full medal ceremony. Team medals. Yes, there are gold, silver, and bronze medals. Yes, there are enough medals for everyone on your team. So, best of luck. You cannot change your team day of. There's no strategy or real need to rely on team members. It's just a fun thing. Like, you guys don't even have to know each other, but it's still gonna be fun. And that's it. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them now. If not, you can find me on Instagram at Select Arcane. You can find me on YouTube at Select Arcane. I have a ton of tutorials. I have a ton of entertainment videos. I have traveled to different shows in the US. I post about them. I show you exactly what I've done. I post custom content like customizing model horses, fixing model horses, making props, things like that. You can find me on Facebook, Select Arcane, art by Andrea Brigadier. And you can also find me at Toronto Live, April 2nd, 9 a.m. I will be hosting, and this will be the last Toronto Live for me, at least until 2026, because I'm going back to school in August. And if you have any more questions, please feel free to ask them through any of the platforms, Instagram, YouTube, or Facebook. I'm always available. I'm always happy to answer your questions. And I'll just do a quick check to make sure that I'm not leaving any questions. Yes, you can use your own photos for collectability cards or breed cards or literally anything collectability. Would you like the class number on the tags for models? No. That's not required. The class number, there's no real class number except for the class number is actually for registering for NAMSA, the 1, 2, 3, 4 on the class list. That's not required because it's just for registration. And I can't wait to see everyone at Toronto Live. So again, if you have any more questions, feel free to send me a message. And thank you so much for joining. This will be available on my YouTube channel, probably coming in March. Again, the show's in April. By the way, if you are looking for another show, coming up on May 6th is Luck of the Irish, held by another local hobbyist in the GTA. Luck of the Irish will be held in Acton, Ontario. That is just outside of Milton, about maybe 40 minutes out of downtown Toronto. I highly recommend that show. I will be judging at it. I will not be hosting. I will be judging and helping Alyssa, the show host. And I hope to see you at both shows. All right. Thanks for watching. Bye.